In the far north, a vast island seems to dwarf continents below. Greenland dominates the top of the world map. Even if we strip away the cartographic illusion, it's the largest island on Earth, immense by any honest measure. From north to south, Greenland stretches about 1,650 miles, enough distance to span the US from the Canadian border to the Gulf Coast. The name is a historical irony, coined over 1,000 years ago by the Norse explorer Eric the Red. An early act of marketing, a hopeful invitation to settlers rather than a literal description. The green that does exist clings to the edges, short Arctic summers bringing life to the tundra along the coast. Early Norse settlements tied the island to Scandinavia, and over time that connection solidified into colonial rule. Today, Greenland is part of the Kingdom of Denmark, though as an autonomous territory, it governs most of its internal affairs. About 56,000 people live here, making the island the least densely populated place on Earth. Most of the population is Inuit, whose ancestors learned to survive and thrive in this environment for generations. They live mostly along the coast in towns stitched between fjords and mountains where the ice retreats. But further inland, it's the realm of eternal winter. The Greenland ice cap is the second largest ice body on Earth after Antarctica. From the air, it looks endless, a white plateau stretching to every horizon. At its thickest points, the ice cap reaches more than 2 miles deep. Frozen water stacked higher than most mountain ranges are tall. The total area it covers is roughly 656,000 square miles, larger than the state of Alaska. Under its own immense weight, the ice slowly flows outward from the center toward the coast, grinding rock into dust. The ice cap holds an unimaginable volume of frozen freshwater, enough to raise global sea levels by over 20 feet. Layer by layer, snowfall compacted into ice, trapping air bubbles that preserve snapshots of Earth's past atmosphere. Scientists drill deep boreholes to read these layers like tree rings, extracting climate data going back more than 100,000 years. Outlet glaciers spill from the ice sheet through mountain corridors, some stretching over 60 miles long. Where they meet the ocean, they fracture and collapse, sending icebergs drifting into fjords with the sound of artillery fire. Ice that has been grounded on bedrock for centuries suddenly floats and physics takes over. The iceberg rises, rolls, and stabilizes, exposing only about 10% of its true size above the surface. Below the waterline, they can extend hundreds of feet down, sculpted into arches, spires, and knife-edged ridges. Greenland produces more icebergs than anywhere else in the Northern Hemisphere. Every year, countless fragments break free, ranging from car-sized chunks to giants the size of city blocks. Some drift only a few miles before melting. Others survive long enough to ride ocean currents far into the North Atlantic. Up close, icebergs are anything but white. Compressed over thousands of years, the ice turns deep blue. Dirt bands, trapped air bubbles, and ancient sediments streak their surfaces like scars. Each white mountain is a cross-section of time. Ice that fell as snow long before recorded history, now briefly visible before returning to water. On Greenland's west coast, Jakobshavn Glacier, known locally as Sisimiut, acts as an iceberg factory. Being the fastest moving on the planet, it flows at speeds exceeding 100 feet per day. This single glacier drains roughly 7% of the entire Greenland ice sheet, funneling an enormous volume of ice toward the sea. When Jakobshavn reaches the coast, it empties into the Ilulissat ice fjord, a conveyor belt for icebergs. The fjord is choked with ice year-round, so packed that for decades it was impossible for ships to pass through. Icebergs pile up, grind against each other, and lock in place, forming a frozen traffic jam. Some of them rise more than 300 feet above the waterline, which means their submerged mass plunges nearly 3,000 feet down. A significant portion of the icebergs that drift into the North Atlantic originate here, carved from Jakobshavn's unstable front. The glacier has been retreating for decades, pulling back inland as warmer ocean water undercuts it from below. At times, its calving front collapses in massive events, releasing ice equivalent to billions of tons in a single year. Beyond the narrow confines of the fjord, the frozen traffic jam exhales into open water, spilling out into Disco Bay. This is where the icebergs slow down, spread out, and begin their long drift away from the island. Disco Bay is vast, roughly 60 miles across, and for much of the year it is crowded with ice. Icebergs from Jakobshavn Glacier fan out here, no longer locked in place, free to rearrange themselves under the influence of wind. Some ground themselves temporarily in shallow water. Others fracture, shedding smaller pieces that scatter like debris. Along the edges of Disco Bay, coastal settlements hold on to narrow strips of ice-free land. One of these settlements is a colourful coastal town of Ilulissat, home to roughly 5,000 people. Ilulissat simply means icebergs in Greenlandic, and that's exactly what defines it. From nearly every vantage point in town, white giants drift past the mouth of the fjord. The sound of cracking ice rolls across the water, sometimes distant, sometimes sharp enough to stop conversations. The town was founded in 1741 as Jakobshavn, a Danish trading post built around whaling and commerce. Over time, the settlement grew into a regional hub, evolving from colonial outpost to modern Arctic town. One of the most recognizable landmarks is the Zion Church, perched on a rocky rise overlooking the harbour. Built in 1779, it is the oldest standing church in Greenland. The modest wooden building reflects the practical simplicity of early Arctic construction. Ilulissat is home to almost as many sled dogs as people. On this remote island, they are not a romantic echo of the past, but a reliable way of transportation. Greenland dogs are a distinct and ancient Arctic breed. Large, muscular animals with thick double coats. A single dog can weigh upward of 70 pounds and move steadily for hours across ice and snow. Greenland dogs are not treated as pets. They're independent, strong-willed, and intensely social within their teams. In places like Ilulissat, where winter locks the landscape into ice for months, dog sleds connect communities that would otherwise be isolated. Hunters use them to reach distant seal and whale grounds. Families travelled frozen fjords to visit neighbouring settlements. A typical sled team consists of 8 to 14 dogs. The sled glides behind them, silent except for the runners cutting into ice. Even today, when snowmobiles exist, sleds remain essential. More dependable in extreme cold. As the icebergs drift and melt, whales arrive, drawn here by one of the most productive marine ecosystems in the Arctic. Where ice meets upwelling water, life concentrates and Disco Bay becomes a seasonal gathering place for some of the largest animals. Humpback whales are the most visible visitors. Each summer, they migrate thousands of miles from tropical breeding grounds. At roughly 50 feet long and weighing up to 40 tons, they move through Disco Bay exhaling plumes of mist. Their tail flukes rise and fall among the ice, black and white against the blue. Disco Bay is also one of the best places in Greenland to encounter bowhead whales. A species built for the Arctic. Thick layers of blubber, massive skulls, and the ability to break through sea ice allow bowheads to remain in these waters year-round. Some individuals are believed to live more than 200 years, making them among the longest-lived mammals on Earth. Across the mouth of the Ilulissat ice fjord, on the opposite shore, sits Ilulissat. Small and quiet, it exists at a different pace, without the noise and movement of a larger town. The settlement is home to roughly 50 residents. The number shifts over time, but the place never grows beyond a human scale. Houses are modest, painted in the familiar Greenlandic palette of reds, yellows and blues, set against bare rock. In the colonial era, Ilulissat became a small Danish trading post, known then as Klaushavn. Like many Greenlandic settlements, it endured cycles of growth, decline, and near abandonment before finally finding an equilibrium. Fishing remains central, supplemented by hunting and small-scale tourism. Carefully designed lodges and restored historic buildings now host visitors looking for something quieter, more intimate than Ilulissat. North of Ilulissat, about 50 miles along Greenland's rugged coast, the Iki Glacier is known for its dramatic and frequent calving. The ice tongue stretches roughly 2 miles across, its face rising nearly 200 feet above the waterline. The surrounding mountains reflect in the calm water. And when the air is still, you can hear the glacier groaning with a low, constant sound. Every few minutes, a section of ice gives way. First a sharp crack, then a roar, followed by a wall of spray as the ice plunges into the sea. On a small bluff overlooking the fjord stand a handful of simple wooden cabins powered by solar panels. From there you can sit on the deck and watch the glacier for hours. Through the long glow of the Arctic summer. Farther up, Greenland's western coast rises one of the island's most striking landmarks. The heart-shaped mountain of Uummannaq. An unmistakable silhouette of a 3,800-foot peak of sheer granite. Split in two like a colossal symbol carved by time and frost. Beneath it lies a small town that shares its name. Uummannaq, which in Greenlandic means heart-shaped. With around 1,200 inhabitants, it's one of the larger communities in northern Greenland. The town sits on a small island surrounded by icy fjords, with the towering mountain as its constant backdrop. Founded in 1763 by Danish colonists, Uummannaq quickly became an important base for fishing and hunting. Danish and Greenlandic children are told that Santa Claus lives in a bay in the west of the island. A turf hut was built there for a Danish television program and remains Santa's home in the popular imagination. Outside the inland town of Kangerlussuaq, about 190 miles northeast of Nuuk, the road climbs gently out of the valley until the horizon turns white. There, at the edge of the Greenland ice sheet, lies Russell Glacier. A frozen wall that marks the boundary between solid land and the vast interior of ice that covers more than 80% of the island. A rough gravel road leads right up to it, ending at a viewpoint where you can stand within a few hundred feet of the ice front. As it flows slowly downhill, it creaks, groans, and occasionally releases deep, thunder-like cracks. Meltwater runs in a milky stream coloured by glacial silt, winding its way back toward the Davis Strait. It's one of the few places where visitors can see the ice sheet up close without a long expedition. A direct encounter with the frozen heart of the island. Far from Greenland's coastal settlements lies a different world. the inland tundra, a vast and silent expanse of rock. And it's here that one of the Arctic's oldest survivors still roams, the muskox. Though it's not really an ox at all, but a distant cousin of sheep and goats. Its ancestors walked the earth long before modern humans reached these latitudes. Around 25,000 musk oxen live on the island, mostly in the central and northeastern regions. They prefer the dry, wind-swept plateaus of the Greenland ice caps fringes, where low shrubs and lichens cling to the ground. Beneath their long, shaggy outer coat lies a layer of an incredibly fine underwool that's 8 times warmer than sheep's wool. Musk oxen were once nearly wiped out in parts of Greenland. Overhunting and environmental changes pushed them toward extinction. But in the 1960s and 1970s, small herds from northeast Greenland were reintroduced to the west. The population took hold, and today the muskox has reclaimed much of its ancient range. Sisimiut sits just north of the Arctic Circle, where the coastal ice is less dominant and the sea remains navigable for much of the year. It is the Greenland's second largest town and the northernmost year-round ice-free port in the country. Founded in 1756, as a Danish trading post, its economy grew around fishing, accompanied by trade. Sisimiut was never entirely at the mercy of sea ice, and that stability allowed it to develop infrastructure more consistently. The landscape here is different. Rolling hills replace steep fjords. Mountains rise inland, but the coastline opens outward. There are no towering icebergs drifting past the harbour. Instead, Sisimiut faces the open sea. The port is active, the rhythm faster. Architecturally, Sisimiut is a mix of traditional single-family houses and apartment blocks raised in the 1960s. The town is still expanding, with the area north of the port reserved for a modern suburb-style housing. Farther south along the same western coastline, Nuuk is not what most people expect from an Arctic capital. It is not a frozen outpost, but a large city, home to about 20,000 people, more than a third of the country's entire population. Nuuk sits at the mouth of a vast fjord system. Framed by mountains, the surrounding waters remain largely ice-free year-round. Founded in 1728 as a Danish colonial centre, the new settlement was named Qaqortoq, meaning Good Hope. Over time, it evolved from mission settlement to modern capital, absorbing political power as the country centralised. Its latitude, at 64 degrees north, makes it the world's northernmost capital, a few miles closer to the pole than Reykjavik. The city stretches along the coast in layers. Older neighbourhoods near the harbour, modern districts climbing the hills behind them. Apartment blocks stand beside brightly painted houses, concrete beside wood, tradition beside ambition. There are roads here, real ones, though they still go nowhere beyond the city limits. Like everywhere else in Greenland, the outside world is reached only by boat or plane. From the shoreline around Nuuk, seals can often be seen resting on rocks, low skerries or drifting ice. Their bodies half submerged, heads raised just enough to watch what's happening above the water. In the fjords, they surface alongside boats, curious and unhurried. Slipping under again with barely a splash. Several seal species inhabit these waters, but the most commonly encountered near the capital are ringed seals and harbour seals. Ringed seals, smaller and more solitary, prefer areas with seasonal ice and sheltered fjords. Harbour seals are larger, more social and more comfortable, hauling out on exposed shores. Both are perfectly adapted to this cold environment. Insulated by thick blubber and equipped with powerful flippers. Farther out, beyond the shelter of towns and fjords, polar bears roam along the coasts and sea ice. Adult males can exceed 1,300 pounds and stretch more than 8 feet from nose to tail. Thick blubber, dense fur, and black skin beneath it all absorb and retain heat. They are perfectly engineered for cold. Seals are their primary prey, and the bear's entire hunting strategy revolves around ice. Polar bears wait patiently beside breathing holes. When a seal surfaces, the strike is sudden and precise. It's not a chase, it's timing. In this landscape, energy matters, and polar bears do not waste it. This relationship ties bears directly to the ice. When it breaks up too early or forms too late, hunting becomes harder. Bears are forced to swim longer distances or spend more time on land, where food options are limited. In Greenland, this shift is increasingly visible along certain coasts, where bears appear closer to settlements than they once did. Across the ice shield, far from the capital and the shipping lanes, another extraordinary natural formation awaits us. Scoresby Sund, the largest fjord system in the world. Cutting deep into the island's icy heart, it's a labyrinth of channels and inlets that stretches nearly 215 miles inland and covers an area roughly the size of Portugal. This is Greenland at its most raw and elemental, a place of colossal scale and profound silence. The fjord's walls rise thousands of feet above the water, their bases carved smooth by the slow grind of glaciers. Vast icebergs drift through the calm, dark water, some the size of city blocks, casting long shadows under the low Arctic sun. The fjord takes its name from William Scoresby, a British whaler and explorer who charted the area in 1822. Some of the icebergs that fill the fjord drift for years before melting, their shapes slowly transformed by wind and tide. In late summer, the ice thins just enough for small expedition ships to navigate the outer fjord, carrying scientists and travellers. At the mouth of Scoresby Sund, where Greenland's vast fjord system meets the Arctic Ocean, lies one of the most isolated settlements on Earth. Ittoqqortoormiit. The name means big house dwellers. A fitting description for a community that stands alone amid some of the most imposing natural architecture on the planet. With around 350 residents, Ittoqqortoormiit is the only town for hundreds of miles in any direction. To the west stretch the ice-choked waters of Scoresby Sund. To the east lies the open Arctic Ocean. There are no roads leading here. Only a small airstrip a few miles away, connected to the town by snowmobile or boat when weather allows. The settlement was founded in 1925 as part of a Danish initiative to establish a permanent community on Greenland's uninhabited east coast. A group of Inuit families from the west coast travelled more than 600 miles by ship to start new lives here. Ittoqqortoormiit is one of the last regions in the Arctic where traditional subsistence hunting remains central to daily life. Providing both food and cultural continuity. Orcas, killer whales, are not constant residents everywhere along Greenland's coast, but they are regular visitors. In summer, when sea ice retreats and life surges back into these waters, Scoresby Sund becomes accessible. and orcas follow. These whales belong to North Atlantic populations adapted to cold seas. Adults can weigh as much as 12,000 pounds. Their tall dorsal fins, up to 6 feet high in males, slice through the water, instantly recognizable even at a distance. The stark black and white pattern is a camouflage, breaking up their outline in the shifting light beneath the surface. In Greenlandic waters, their diet can include fish, seals, and even other whales. In places like Scoresby, they are known to target seals that rest on ice floes or move through narrow leads of open water. Orcas hunt in family groups, highly coordinated, communicating constantly, adapting their tactics to prey behavior. Isolated and exposed, Tasiilaq is the largest town in eastern Greenland and the human anchor of the region. Home to about 2,000 people, it lies on the edge of Tasiilaq Island, a rugged mass of rock surrounded by fjords. Steep mountains rise directly behind the town, their slopes cut by snowfields and waterfalls. The harbour opens toward a maze of offshore islands and channels where icebergs drift in from the East Greenland current. Tasiilaq was founded in 1894 as a Danish trading station. For centuries, Tasiilaq was one of the most remote inhabited areas in the Arctic, cut off by distance. It sits directly in the path of ice flowing south from the Arctic Ocean, making the surrounding waters some of the most ice-filled on Greenland's coast. In recent decades, Tasiilaq has become a gateway for those seeking Greenland at its rawest. Travelers come for the dramatic landscapes and the sense of standing at the edge of the inhabitable world. Quietly moving through the edges of Greenland's landscape is one of its most perfectly adapted residents. The Arctic fox. They are built for cold in a way few mammals are. Adults typically measure between 2 and 3.5 feet from nose to tail. Their compact bodies reduce heat loss, their ears are short and rounded, and their paws are covered in thick fur. In winter, their coat becomes exceptionally dense, one of the warmest natural insulators in the Arctic. Many Arctic foxes turn completely white in winter, disappearing into snowfields and frozen plains. In summer, that same fox shifts to brown or grey, matching rock and tundra. Inland, they hunt lemmings and small rodents, tracking population cycles. In winter, when food is scarce, foxes often follow polar bears onto the sea ice. Scavenging seal remains left behind after a hunt. It's a risky strategy, but an effective one. In Greenland, efficiency matters more than pride. At the southern tip of Greenland, where the Arctic loosens its grip, lies Qaqortoq. Still remote, but touched by a gentler climate and a longer human history. With a population of just over 3,000, Qaqortoq is one of the oldest continuously inhabited areas in the country. The surrounding hills are greener here, especially in summer, dotted with grasses and low shrubs, rather than bare rock alone. This region was once the heart of Norse Greenland. Around 1,000 years ago, Viking settlers arrived, drawn by a climate that, at the time, allowed farming to survive. A short journey from Qaqortoq stand the ruins of Valsey Church, the best preserved Norse structure in Greenland. Built in the early 14th century, the church is known for hosting the last recorded event of the Norse in the region, a wedding held in 1408. The modern town was founded in 1775 as a Danish trading post, and it climbs the rock above the harbour in terraces of brightly coloured houses. What sets Qaqortoq apart culturally is how art is woven directly into the town. The streets themselves hold the collection. Dozens of stone reliefs are carved directly into exposed rock faces along paths, stairways, and hillsides. Created by local and international artists, these carvings depict Inuit faces, animals, mythological figures, and abstract forms. Along Greenland's coastlines, where cliffs rise straight out of cold water, another kind of life takes over the air. During summer, puffins gather in colonies along rocky coastlines and offshore islands. Up close, these small birds are all function. They weigh roughly a pound, but their bodies are dense and powerful. Their wings, short and stiff, work like flippers underwater, allowing them to fly through the sea in pursuit of fish. Their famous beaks, bright orange, yellow, and blue during breeding season, are not decoration. They're tools, perfectly shaped for gripping small fish like capelin and sand eels, sometimes carrying a dozen at once. On land, puffins look awkward, even comic. In the air and underwater, they are efficient and fast. That contrast feels very Greenlandic. Nothing wasted, nothing ornamental unless it serves a purpose. Along the remote northern coastlines of Greenland, the shores are dominated not by human activity, but by another presence: walruses. Massive, wrinkled, these marine mammals haul out on rocky beaches and ice floes in numbers that can reach into the thousands. Walruses are a cornerstone of the Arctic ecosystem here. Their sheer size, bulls can weigh over 3,700 pounds and stretch 12 feet long, means they leave lasting impressions on the beaches they inhabit. The coast of Greenland serves as one of the largest haul-out sites in the world. Younger males often dominate the edges, while the older, larger bulls claim the centre of the herd. Mothers keep their calves close, guiding them through shallow waters with careful nudges. Walruses are highly adapted to the Arctic environment. Their thick skin and layers of blubber insulate them from the frigid waters. And their tusks, more than ornamental, are practical tools. Used for climbing onto ice, for defense, and for establishing dominance within the herd. Farther north from where most Greenlandic towns cling to coasts, the world opens into something primordial. Northeast Greenland National Park, the largest national park on Earth. An expansive wilderness 375,000 square miles in size, bigger than France, Spain and Germany combined. This is Greenland, stripped down to its fundamentals. The park spans the entire northeastern quarter of the island. It contains massive fjord systems, glaciers that flow straight into the sea, and tundra that supports life against improbable odds. Roads do not exist here. Towns do not exist here. For long stretches, even footprints are rare. Ancient rock formations rise above ice sheets that have shaped the land for hundreds of thousands of years. In a world increasingly measured and managed, this park represents something rare. A place where nature operates at full scale. As the climate on our planet keeps changing, Greenland is warming, not evenly, not gently, but unmistakably. Glaciers that once advanced now retreat. The ice sheet, which still blankets nearly 4/5 of the island, is thinning at its edges. Valleys once locked beneath ice are reappearing, revealing tundra that hasn't seen daylight in thousands of years. In summer, the growing season stretches a little longer. Grass pushes farther uphill, flowers appear where ice recently stood. And the name begins to feel less ironic. Greenland was once a promise, then a contradiction. In the future, it may become something closer to the truth. Greener than it has been for much of human history.